Welcome everyone, I'm Dominic, CTO and co-founder of Dropsolid, and welcome to our podcast, the Open Digital Experience podcast. We will be talking about content management systems, digital experience platforms, everything you need to build the best customer experience. We will be talking about Drupal, Matic, everything open source to do this, and we will be interviewing experts from inside our company and also outside our company. So, if you have 30 minutes, you go on a bike ride, go on a drive, put on our podcast and enjoy and learn everything digital experience. Hello everyone, I am Dominic, I am CTO and co-founder of Dropsolid, and I am here with Niels, one of our leading solution architects, and we're going to talk about headless and Drupal. So, Niels, first question, why would you go headless with Drupal?
Because we can, and we can do it without compromise. That's our goal, to do it without compromise. I think we can. We haven't done it in the past. We had our decision tree there as well, where we were choosing when do you do it, do you not do it. But now we're at a point in time where we can perfectly say Drupal and headless is the best solution for most of the cases, and we believe that we can do it now without any compromise.
And why is that?
Because we basically took all the best things that we get from Drupal. So all the massive parts that Drupal provides it to you, like we have the way of like the perfect system. Like one of the systems that Drupal has is cache and validation in Drupal 8 and Drupal 9 and 10. Is that when you build a page, Drupal actually knows which parts are actually in that page, and then it can smartly just invalidate that page, so people always get the latest content. And we can actually leverage that system from Drupal, which a lot of other CMSs don't have, and we can put that in our headless solution. So I know there are a lot of headless solutions out there where people are still waiting like 10, 15 minutes for their changes to be visible on the website. But in our case, that won't be by leveraging that part of Drupal. That's
Okay,
like one
so
example.
all right, yeah. So it's more than just getting content from a content store.
Yeah, we're making it smart and making sure that like our headless solution. So, for instance, we have chosen to leverage the technology of Next.js. So Next.js uses the server-side rendering as well. So we're going to use all those, the best of Next.js and the best of Drupal to make the best solution for our clients.
Okay, yeah, you see a lot of Next.js, Drupal. Next.js seems like a match made in heaven. Why is it? Why has it become React Next.js with Drupal?
Well, the main thing is that Next.js, like even if you look at it, it has some years on the record already. So it's not a new technology. It has been, I think, its first release was in 2016, and then I think its latest version, I think it's version 13, has released in October 2022. So it has been very heavily used and very heavily developed on. And it's actually a framework that is being used for production applications. So we want the best of both worlds. So we know Drupal has done that for years and years now, and we know that Next.js has done that for other clients as well.
Okay, do you see Next.js take a similar place in the Drupal ecosystem, like for example the templating engine Twig is taking?
That's for me a hard one to say. I think No clear decision has been made in the Drupal community about that for sure. So we keep it open. So we have, aside from Next.js, you also have Druxt, which is based on Vue as well. So it makes sure that that basically Drupal can provide it to all of those frameworks. So if you want to switch out one of the two, it's good. But we have seen that many different companies who heavily use Drupal have invested in Next.js as well to make easy integrations already with Drupal. But also some have done that for Vue, Vue-based frameworks.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit more, like in Drupal, the theme system, it generates the HTML
Yeah.
and the CSS out of the box with a little bit of jQuery in sometimes, and then you get your Drupal experience out of the box. Do you see a path where Drupal will come with, for example, a Next.js or a Vue front end out of the box?
Out of the box, that might be. I don't know yet if Drupal wants to do that, so the entire community, but I've seen initiatives left and right to basically do that. Yeah. So you have Drupal as because since a couple of years now, Drupal has been focused on the API first initiative, where basically anything you create in Drupal is basically exposed via an API. So everything, every single piece of content is actually available through an API in Drupal, even the config in some parts. And that's the amazing part, because then you can just plug in any system. And indeed, like you say, then you say like, okay, the entire front end, instead of having your Twig template engine create your pages, you'll have your Next.js application that just consumes the API from Drupal. So eventually, that's what our goal is as well, is to have that starter kit where you basically say Drupal with our Next.js starter kit, that is a website. Together,
Yeah,
you have your web application fully ready.
yeah. Maybe let's zoom in a little bit onto that. Like you're doing a lot of projects here in the Dropsolid digital experience agency. Of course, project needs to be competitive, so the more out of the box, the better, right?
Yeah. That's the thing. That's what we want to get to eventually, is to get our so basically we have a rocket ship install profile that we start from when we make our projects, and we want to make sure that that rocket ship install profile is also out of the box ready to go for headless solutions. So we on one hand have rocket ship that has all of its data exposed in the best way possible, and then we have our Next.js starter kit that basically implements the most common parts already for your Drupal site. So we don't have to do all of that stuff every time, because every website that every application that we build will have those same basic things like SEO. We want our meta tags to be pushed from our Drupal site to our Next.js application. So those things, it would be stupid if we would build those things every time, because it's not an added value anymore to the client. So the endpoint what we have now is that our starting point needs to be equal to what we do right now with Rocketship. And that's our goal, is to make sure that we don't charge our clients for we're going headless. No, because we can offer them the best solution at the same price as we do our normal solutions, as we did our older solutions, like with Drupal then purely.
Yeah, just with the HTML front end out of the box.
Yeah.
Yeah, because what and maybe we can go a little bit further in that. If you look at other headless CMSs, the new ones who are on the market, they deliver SDKs and front ends out of the box, which leverage their form of site building. were not so strong, in my opinion. Could change in the future because they seem to be developing at a high pace. Is the site building capabilities? So a
Mhm.
lot of question is like if you put a React or a Vue front end in front of your Drupal, do you still have your powerful site building capabilities that Drupal offers?
Yeah, that's the thing that we're going for as well. So in the last years, Drupal has introduced Layout Builder as well, where you can basically create your entire page by dragging your blocks onto the page and making your layout and your content in the same place. And also, like we said, like Drupal is exposing that data, so you can build your pages in Drupal and render them in whichever application you want. So you could even go then a step further and say, you know what, my Drupal, I'll have multiple layouts for a single piece of content where I say, okay, for the channel, the public website, I will make it look like this, but I reuse that same content, but in a different layout. For instance, I have the TV and the income of the building where I want to show specific things. Then you can also do that. So it is very powerful what Drupal allows you to do, and I have not seen that in other systems because they're always too focused on a single goal or too narrow, and that's what Drupal offers you. Drupal offers you the flexibility to do all those things, go multi-channel, add an immense amount of context and relationships between your content, and not have it as a dumb thing in there, not just a dumb content store. Drupal will make sure that your relations between your content is there.
Okay, and maybe a tricky question, but will it also work when you do some very complex site building? Like, for example, just things that pop into my mind. You start adding filters in your views, exposed filters, handling arguments, things you can do with views. For example, with layout builder, drag and drop. You already mentioned this. More complex forms, like if you do the web form module, you do multi steps. This will all just work out of the box with.
That's definitely our goal. Like our goal is to first of all have web form completely compatible with it. So basically, if you create your form in web form, that there is a form rendered in the Next.js that reads out the config of your web form, and that actually works together perfectly. We're gonna take baby steps in that. So first, the most common items that are being used, and slowly we're gonna add functionalities to those integrations, and we kind of we're also hoping a bit that the community will help us out in that, because I think our goal is still to open source our efforts, so everybody can help grow from this, and we can build an ecosystem that works for everyone.
Okay, yeah, like you mentioned the community, like what is already available in the community? What can you leverage already?
Yeah, so we have to give a proper shout out to chapter 3 as well, because they did a nice integration already for Next.js. So they have Next.js for Drupal that they have open sourced their starter kit basically. So they have a starter kit that integrates with a vanilla Drupal website if you install some extra modules, and that will allow you to start doing some basics. So for instance, if you have a page type, you can render that page type, and it will have some content. So they have some nice examples as well of how to tackle certain things, and that will help us to get to the starter kit that we really want, the one that has that just has zero compromise.
All right. Okay. So if you're a Drupal agency and you wanna do your first headless project, do you have any tips?
Yeah. Make sure you use your Drupal. Make sure that you have the right people who are creating your Drupal as well. Make sure that you use the right patches for now, and make sure that you help contribute back to the community, because that's where it's at. Like everything works right now, but you need a couple of patches. But if we all help out and we get those patches in, then it's going to be a really nice solution there.
Okay, and how difficult is it as a Drupal developer to learn something like React or Vue? Like, how much time would it take to you? Like, how many projects until you are proficient enough so you
Yeah,
can be part of a professional team delivering projects at a reasonable pace that is still commercially viable?
yeah. So currently we're working with a 40-hour training schedule to get the basics in for most of our developers, and then it's yeah, just it's the most things is like learning on the job. It's really challenging and going into those projects and actually developing it, because in the end what's programming, it's about learning a syntax. It's the same concepts, it's just about learning a different language.
It's also just MVC framework, same principles,
Yeah,
same as with Symfony. What
the
is the
biggest
biggest
challenge,
difference?
yeah, the biggest challenge is the asynchronous of data. Like in many, like if we look at our PHP applications, then everything is synchronous, so it's all in one single line where actions happen. With our JavaScript applications, we have to think more into, I have asked for some data, but I might not have it yet, and in the meantime I'm doing some other stuff. But when I get that data back, I need to have an action that I do with it.
Can you give an example? Just like a web application example, something that happens all the time in web applications to give us an idea?
Yeah, for instance, if I would have a public service website and there's maybe like an interruption, and I want to let my clients know that there's an interruption by putting a banner on the website. There might not be a banner, but in our JavaScript application, we are actually calling an API to get that data, but on the first load, it might not be there yet. Like the data might not be received from that external API. So we render our entire page, but in the meantime, it's also fetching the extra data. So in the meantime, the user can scroll the website, but once we get that data back, then we show it. And that
Okay.
we can do without actually putting extra logic in. Because in a case of, for instance, if we would do something like that in Drupal, then we would have to first load our entire page, then write some extra code with JavaScript to fetch that stuff, and then do it separately. So basically, the way we would do it is we would have two ways of doing it to get the same result.
Yeah.
But in our JavaScript application, a single a single piece of logic that just fetches that, and then when it's ready, it will show it.
Okay. And otherwise, you just do some old school Ajax magic
Yes,
to
exactly.
make it happen.
Yeah, so that's the main benefit, is that you don't have to write things twice if you want to do get data asynchronous, and that's
Okay.
the main benefit for many of the cases.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit more on which kind of architectures for your Drupal site you would propose when you want to make your website decoupled fully or semi-decoupled?
Um, uh, in architectures, what do you mean exactly by architectures in that case?
Like, how do you set up your Drupal site? Like,
Okay.
for the different use cases, if you want to go fully headless or semi-decoupled?
So, and in that case, the thing is that we in our at Dropsolid, we would always start from rocket ship for sure, and then depending on which direction we want to go, we either add our parts that make it headless, so the extra modules that we need to make sure that it works with a decent API and all that stuff. So that's the directions we choose.
And then you just build your Drupal site as you would do it, and then you just add the pieces to make it semi-decoupled on certain people? Or
So
how
if we look at if you look at semi-decoupled, then we basically build our website like we would usually do. We do the front end as well in Drupal, and then we create these little applications that we can plug into Drupal. So for instance, we say like with a semi-decoupled solution, we would say if we have a certain piece of like for instance, we want to have a calculator on some of the pages, then we would say, okay, this block, this will be replaced by that little application that we have built. But what we do now is then, for instance, we don't put the theming on the application itself. We put the theming still in Drupal, but the application just makes sure that the needed HTML is there and the needed interactions are there. That's what we would do in a case of semi-decoupled. When we were going fully decoupled, then we configure our Drupal website, and it's mainly we then do the site building part, and we don't do any of the rendering part. So we make our data structures, we set up our content types, we make sure everything is exposed through our API. We also make sure that we don't expose too much, because that is also a case that can happen easily, is that people expose too much data and some data you might not want to have exposed, because that is a part that Drupal normally takes away from you, because we only expose the parts that you see on the page if you use a Twig template. But if you have an open API, then all of the fields can be exposed. So luckily, Drupal has a system for that where you can just say expose these parts, but not these parts. And that's then how we would set it up to make sure that we're still secure, we're not leaking any data, to just have it the proper way.
Okay, and what are the modules that you typically install extra with Drupal core to make this happen?
Yeah. So luckily, Drupal so Drupal core contains the JSON API module. That's the one we use mainly for consuming, but then we also have JSON API extras, which allows you to expand a lot on JSON API, and that one allows you to do a lot more manipulation of your data. So out of the box, Drupal will expose all of it. Then we can use JSON API extras to limit what we want to expose to the public. And that way we could create this safe solution. And then if you're, of course, integrating with Next.js, then you have the decoupled router. That's a definite must to have it, because then Drupal still manages the routes of your system, but your application actually knows. So a good example of that, to try to explain it, is that in Drupal, you have these aliases for your nodes where you basically say like, oh, this is my URL. There's actually an endpoint that you can call and say like, hey, this URL, which entity or content type is linked to that path, and it will return you that path, the actual API path that you need to call that entity. So for instance, if it's the front page and it says like, okay, what's the front page? Which node is being used for the front page? It will return that, and then we automatically have that. So you can leverage Drupal's entire system of the aliases, and also when you change the URL, the automatic redirects that are created. So all that stuff is still managed by Drupal. So Drupal is still the heart of it, but the front-end application leverages all that power.
Yeah, that's all stuff I suppose you don't have in most headless CMSs that you have to build yourself, and you don't notice in the pretty demos. But once you get the system up and running, and it's running at scale, and you have to make sure, oh, I have to also build in the aliases. I also have to build the automatic redirects if a URL has changed. Also, I suppose the access control layer, the ACL, is also built in, so Drupal is still managing everything permission-wise, so you don't have to duplicate all these things, limiting a lot of security risks. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So do I understand you only need like Drupal core and 2 modules to make this happen?
You can probably do it with Drupal core purely without, because if it's an API, then you can do it. The extra modules are just there to make it a lot smarter, to leverage more of what Drupal does out of the core. there are probably a couple more modules that you would need to make it all work, but those are definitely the most important ones.
Yeah. And all the modules in the core, they also support that, like if you want to expose a view or a form or whatever, it just works.
I have to check on that one. But views, I think, yeah, views you can have exposed as an API as well. The results of a view, and then web form, I have to see. I don't think web form out of the box, because the question is, web form exposes the results out of the box, so you can get to the results, but the configuration, I need to double check on.
Okay. So, but there's a lot of opportunity for contrib modules on the headless space.
For sure, yeah, and there already has been a lot as well. There have been many people doing some little bits here and there to improve on the experience, and that's also we have been using those little bits and pieces to improve our offering as well.
Okay, which contrib projects in the headless space should we put on our radar, on our list to watch them?
That's a hard question. I still think Next.js, the Next.js module itself can probably use a bit more love as well.
Okay.
And then everything related to the layout builder, exposing of the layout builder data. Those also needs a bit more love.
And how much love? Like what kind of love? You mean it's like how does it work? It's just one stream, or it needs more structure, or what
I
is
think
the...
I think we need to look at the issue queues and process some and review the improvements that have been done and help release new versions of it to just improve on and expose more of the functionality that Drupal offers us.
Right. Do you think, as a final question, Niels, that in the future all Drupal websites will become headless by default, or is it still just something optional to go the extra mile?
I think once we have the full-on starter kit, then I think it doesn't matter anymore. Then I think it is, you could choose either way. You could choose to go fully headless, or you could choose to just have your Drupal stack. I think it depends on what kind of talent do you have in house to keep on maintaining your application. But it should not cost you any more to either choose either way.
But that means that if I'm, for example, if I am a customer and I can choose between a headless Drupal and a normal Drupal, and the headless Drupal offers me the capabilities of multi-channel and faster pages and whatnot, I'll always choose the headless Drupal, right? Or
Sure. Yeah.
do I see
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
wrong?
They're in our vision of a headless Drupal without compromise. You could always say like, okay, my default choice would be headless then.
Okay.
Headless with Drupal.
So headless is the future. It's not a hype anymore.
I think it's the important thing to think here is that there are many developments still happening in the JavaScript space, and I think currently we are on the cusp of seeing great things happen there. So it's important to be to be there already, to have that offering, and then when those fancier implementations are actually available, that we can easily integrate those things. And then I'm talking about having 3D rendering in our application easily, where it's where you use data from Drupal and you render 3D applications. So, for instance, in the whole VR AR space, you can easily go in there and have it powered by a Drupal on the back end.
Yeah.
So that's where you can win the big things. Or even if you say, you know what, I make an application, for instance, Slack, the messaging tool. You could make something like that and have it powered on the back end by some part by Drupal, because we are using those front end frameworks to create native code and turn it into applications.
Okay, so you see Drupal being like like, how do you see that? You see Drupal then as a content store or also as a
If you
configuration store, or
if you look further than purely the content websites in the world, then you could have your Drupal be an easy way to create new data structures for whatever you need, because once you have your Drupal up and running, you can create as many data structures as you want and then expose those. And every application is usually something like that. It's about exposing data structures, and it's about connecting those parts of data to each other.
Okay. So you see us, because I remember 10 years ago, a lot of things got built in Drupal, like CRM systems got built in Drupal, ERP systems got built in Drupal, your custom business application, whatnot, DIY, whatever application got built in Drupal. If it was always the best idea, I don't know. In recent years, you see Drupal being more and more just used for CMS or digital experience platform.
Mhm.
You think with the headless capabilities, Drupal will be once again be applied to more use cases?
I think I think that will be the case for sure. It will be part of your architecture landscape for sure. You have, for instance, a single Drupal that will power some parts of multiple applications. So imagine if you have multiple applications that all have their specific purpose and are maybe connected to an ERP system or a CRM, but you need some content on those things. You could almost say, like, let's have a central Drupal that manages all the content for those different types of application. And it's
No.
about the separation of concerns, where you basically say, like, Drupal is responsible for this part, but the other parts, and then you just have one single layer for representation.
To manage the content.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Great stuff. I think we got our time here. I
Okay.
think it was a good interview. I think we can talk a lot longer about this
Yeah,
subject
sure.
of headless, but let's keep it here. Niels, thank you very much, and have a nice evening.
You
And
too.
yes, talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.